Good evening and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. This is the Tuesday before Mother's Day, and I'm excited about our special guest. I have my co-host.
And good evening. Happy Tuesday, the first Tuesday in this month of May, and it's already getting off to a great start.
Absolutely, Dr. J. I'm so excited. You know, the hour always goes so fast, but the show is about the resilience of a woman. You know, women are phenomenal creatures, and we've endured a lot. We have to endure a lot. We're mothers, we're wives, we're sisters, and we're aunts, and we are the most resilient creatures on the planet. But this young lady that we have tonight, I'm so excited about bringing her to us.
You know, we talk about the resilience of women, and particularly the resilience of a mother. Listen, as you said, mothers have such a role to play, and it's not automatic. You know, it's one thing just to carry a child, but it's another thing to have to overcome adversity, to overcome so many things in your life. And our special guest tonight, she is the epitome of just that. It has not been, it sounds like the old saying, life has not been a bed of roses. Well, she can definitely say that life has not been a bed of roses. However, we're going to hear about her incredible story from going from being trafficked to triumph. So I want you to make sure that you've heard that, because so many times when we hear the word trafficking, especially I would say African American community, we don't envision that. We always think
No,
trafficking is for other people, and then most people think trafficking is what we see in the movie Taken, which it is that, and we think that it's happening somewhere else. But it happens right here in the good old US of A. It happens right here, even in our very state, in our neighborhoods. So tonight, our special guest, Sandra Maria Anderson, she is absolutely an incredible individual. Today, she stands as the founder of the Love Gardens Ministry International. Not only she's the founder, that's a nonprofit holistic mental health and mental wellness organization that teaches about empowerment, that teaches about individuals' lives being transformed. Sandra is a mother. She's a grandmother. She is a doctoral student, an advocate for health and wellness. Not only she's that, she's a speaker. She's a fitness instructor, and she's the author of the book Lessons from the Thorns. His Grace is Sufficient.
wow.
And that story depicts her journey and what she's come through. Listen, she's absolutely incredible. She is speaking all over. She's doing some amazing things. Her life is about empowerment. And so that's who she is and so much more. And let's give a hot topic from the soul. Welcome to Sandra Maria Anderson, very soon to be Dr. Sandra Maria Anderson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you so
evening,
much.
Queen.
Good
So
evening.
happy to have you. I'm so delighted, so excited to hear your story of triumph. And I know the guests are eager and sitting, waiting, wanting to feed from your table.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Goodwin. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
We're getting a
Well,
little bit of feedback. So as you continue to begin to tell your story, if you would just center at the mic so that we won't miss anything that you're saying, because I know that every word is going to be valuable to empower and inspire queens around the world.
Amen. You know, when we think about the word resilience, we all have a story that we don't give ourselves credit for, especially in the African American community, because we've been so historically marginalized, historically cast aside and disregarded as less than, that we have through generations believed that, and we have adopted that in our life. But it's time now that we rise up and know who we are. And it took me a long time, Dr. Viola and Dr. Thicklin, to get to a place in my life where I no longer was loyal to this dysfunction of my family of origin. And I was no longer loyal to the pain of my past that tried to hold me there where I was. It took a long time for me to get here. But the lessons from the thorns have taught me a valuable lesson. And that is that there is something called post-traumatic growth that is birthed from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow.
And we embrace post-traumatic growth, we will start to see what the Bible calls what your eyes have not seen, your ears have not heard, and haven't even entered into your heart of what God has in store for us when we just surrender all of the pain, not just from our past, but our forefathers' past too. And so my dissertation that I'm working on now is on epigenetic studies. And for those of you who may not know what epigenetic studies is, it's like a sort of memory. And what it looks like is when we've never gone through trauma ourselves. For example, in the Holocaust, there was a young lady, a true case story, where a young lady went through horrible nightmares. And then she wanted to throw herself in the fire. She never understood why did she want to throw herself in the fire. And it was because her great grandmother went through being incinerated in the Holocaust. And what happens is that trauma get passed on through the genes. So the genes keep the memory. And Dr. Bessel van der Kolk wrote an excellent book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Right.
And it's about this issue. It speaks about this phenomenon, but it's not a phenomenon at all. Because the Bible tells us in the book of Deuteronomy that the sins of the father goes to the third and the fourth generation. And we just got new research in, and I'm so excited about it because I was able to put it in my dissertation that secular research that is not based in theology and theology, so to speak, but it said that the genes remember from the father's sperm to the third and fourth generation.
Wow.
This is empirical based evidence, and it's just science is finding grace in the word of God. Yeah. And so his grace is sufficient brings me to my life and my own traumatic past. My family, I grew up in Tampa, and I had an amazing family. So I thought, because when we're children, all we see is what we see. Yeah. Anything else, we don't have language to make sense of. We don't have language to understand other than the language that's been introduced to us in our young childhood. So when my parents divorced and my mother introduced another man in my family, all we knew was as children was that to be seen and not heard.
Not heard.
That was the mandate, Dr. Valerie, of that day. It was the mandate of that time, Pastor Thicklin. And so all I knew is when this man attacked me one day, and when I say attacked, I've never been hurt the way that he hurt me. I did not know what rape was. At 7 years old, there's no language for rape. And you got to remember, back in those days, we have different terminologies than we have now. And so now the more that we understand what rape is, what sex trafficking is, what trauma is, now we're able to put a name to it. Mm-hmm. But what we can't put a name to, we internalize as our fault. We internalize is, what did I do wrong? I internalize that it's something wrong with me because why did this happen to me? And so as a young 7-year-old child that was being raped by her stepfather, and when I say rape, I mean exactly what it was. And I didn't have that term then. So it took me a while to grow from that and to know what that even meant. But I remember saying to myself that I was going to take that to the grave because I couldn't hurt my mother. I couldn't hurt my mother with what has happened. And a part of me feel like I couldn't say anything because I wouldn't be loved anymore, because I was so damaged. I wouldn't be loved. I wouldn't be accepted. I already felt so dehumanized and so dirty. And so fast forward to now, I'm 11 years old, and this continued from a 7 to 11 years old. And now I ran away, not knowing that there was other monsters out there. You see, with youth comes a certain naivety. You're so far removed from the realities of the world because you're looking through your very skewed prism of your world. So I'm thinking now that The only monster in the world is Frankenstein, the Wolf Man, the
Yeah.
Invisible Man, and my stepdad,
Wow.
not knowing that there are so many other monsters out there. So by the age of 11 years old, when I ran away 48 hours later, after trying to find my dad, and I did, I found my dad. He was still in the same state of depression and alcoholism. And I ran away to Fort Lauderdale Beach, and from there, I was trafficked. I was picked up by two African American men. That could have been my uncle. That could have been my brothers. They looked just like me. And then from there, I was placed on a trafficking circuit from Fort Lauderdale to Miami and back again until I was finally sold to a white man on Fort Lauderdale Beach. His name was Edward. And it was the first time I ever heard the word cocaine. First time I ever heard the word quaalude or saw it. It was the first time I ever saw a lot of things, but sex trafficking and what I was going through, I would have never told you that's what it was because I
Right.
had no language at 11 years
Right.
old to understand what was happening to me. All I can tell you is the play by play because some things are unforgettable. And the brain is uniquely designed to wire around traumatic events. That's
That's
why
true.
we remember more trauma than we remember anything else. And we do it because of survival. You see,
It's
the brain
survival.
around that for survival. And it happened years ago when, say, our forefathers were encountering a saber-toothed tiger. We needed that fight or flight. When we needed that memory of what made us run, so we make sure we keep ourselves safe. That's just self-preservation. But what I didn't know is what trauma was going to do to my life over the long term.
Yeah.
Trauma has a long-term effect until somebody comes along, until a Dr. Valerie or Dr. Thicklin, or until someone who's been there and made it through it comes along and tells us first what happened.
Yes.
Because what I can't understand, I will make meaning out of it based on my limited understanding of it.
Yeah.
So I would think something's a demon when it's not a demon at all. When it's really just trauma that's unresolved,
Yes.
where my brain haven't processed it. So it manifests in such a way that it looks like a demonic activity when it's not. And unfortunately, I come from a background where everything was either demonized or it was put in a place where if I couldn't understand it, some other type of conspiracy will be attached to it.
Right.
So, but never the reality of it, never the reality of what trauma does to us. And trauma has such a long-term impact on not just the brain, but the five senses. So we will live in a state of hypervigilance long after the threat is over,
Yes.
long after the trouble is over, until we can understand that in the brain, we're so fearfully and wonderfully made by our Creator, that in the brain, there's a hippocampus and there's a thalamus. And that thalamus, you don't even have to know what it is. I'll tell you what it is. It's whenever you saw a spider or a snake or something that you saw that you're afraid of. Some people are afraid of frogs, right? It's something that you're afraid of. You don't have to think about moving. You don't have to think about running. You just do it. It's automatic, right? So this is our autonomic nervous system. We move without even thinking. Problem with trauma is this. And it took me years to understand this. It took me years of educating myself.
Processing it.
And processing it. Yes, ma'am. Years of being teachable, because I had to be teachable. Because trauma will make you so hypervigilant that you will fight your help. You'll fight those who are coming to help you.
Yes. Yes.
You'll fight those who just have your best intentions. You will fight off everyone. It's like someone who's drowning. And if anybody who's listening to me that's ever been in the business of being a lifeguard, you already know. When someone is drowning, you have to be ready to restrain them in such a way that they don't drown you too.
Absolutely.
And so I did not know at that young age, when I was picked up from Edward's house, put in juvenile, because back in those days, again, police was not informed as they are now. They was not informed of what to look for in a trafficking victim, what to look for. And when you look like I look, you don't look like the J.C. Dugarts, the young lady who they made a movie out of her life, because this young woman went through such trauma from her traffickers, and I believe she had children from her traffickers as well. I don't look that. I don't look that part. And so with a people that's already been so marginalized and so discriminated in this country, trauma becomes very normal, and it looks very normal to us. Even the way the police handled me when I was picked up and I was placed in DCF custody, I was taken first to juvenile on Broward Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale. When they found out the facts of what had happened to me, they put me in a DCF custody. And so with the Department of Children and Families, with all the things that they gave me, and I underscored this in my book, with all the things that they offer us as children who are abused or mistreated, they leave out a very important component. So they offer you shelter, they offer you food, but they fail to give you the second rescue. So when I was rescued from Edward's home, I still needed another rescue. And that was a rescue from the trauma. This looked like a specialized intervention.
So Sandra, when you were picked up from the Perk Edward, how did that come about? How did that happen, where you were picked up from him, and then what were the consequences of him trafficking you?
Thank you for asking that, Dr. That's a great question. So when I was in Edward's home, first of all, I never knew night and day, because you never leave out of the house. So other than the light coming in from the curtain or the blinds, I don't know night or day. So I do know, however, when Edward takes a shower, he takes very long showers. And I remember this one day that I was sitting there watching a movie, crisscross applesauce on his floor in his studio apartment on Fort Lauderdale Beach. I remember hearing that really raised us. My mom worked all the time. My dad was barely home. So it was my older sister Joyce that was raising us. And I remember hearing her, holding her picture to my heart, because when I ran away from home, I had a duffel bag, and that duffel bag had my sister's pictures in it, my sister picture, because I had an attachment bond with my sister Joyce. And I remember looking at her picture this particular night, and I know it was night then, because when I looked at her picture, she said, "It's time to leave." And I remember Edward always told me that the two men that bought me there was outside. My brother told me he was telling the truth. So I was not taking chances with them, because they treated me worse than he did. Edward never hit me. And I know I'm going to prolong this a little bit, but I want to give it some context. Edward never hit me. The two men that assaulted me and took me to Miami and back again, and assaulted me a few times, they did hit me. They abused me. They were violent with me. And so Edward never had to.
You were 11.
I was 11. Yes, ma'am. I was 11
years old.
Yes. And so Edward never was violent with me. He was a white man, mid 40s, 50s, as much as I could tell at that age, but he never hit me. He never, ever laid a hand on me other than to rape me over and over again. And so when he told me that they would be out there, I believed it. And that's how I processed it. However, close to my 12th birthday, which I didn't even know at this time, the only way I'm able to keep time is from the police reports and from when I went into shelter home. That's the only way I was able to keep time. Because when you go through trafficking, time stops. There is no time. And I need everyone to understand this and how it looks like in the long term. But I want to answer your question first. So at that time, I was looking at my sister Joyce's picture. And I remember her telling me, no one's outside, and I needed to go. And I remember not wanting to go because I said, he never hit me. My stepfather hit me and abused me. The man who brought me to him hit me. And I remember not wanting to leave because he never hit me, you see? But I remember hearing her voice saying, it's time to go. Slide the chain. No one's outside. And I remember sliding. He had 3 chains and a deadbolt lock. And I remember sliding them, shaking the whole time, hearing the water run. And she said to me, she being my sister's voice in my ear, saying, you got to do it before the water stops. And that's all I remember. I slid the chains. I walked out, and the police was on the corner. And when the police saw me, they put me in the back seat and took me to juvenile. And that's how I got out. But I want to go back to the part about not knowing the time of day, and losing time. And you really lose time because it was years, even now at 50 something years old. I think the best invention known to man is not sliced bread at all, but it's a GPS. I have for many years no sense of direction or time. I would lose time. I would lose how long I've been in the bathroom, how long I've been on a project because of dissociation. I didn't know it was dissociation at that time, but that's what it was. I would just lose time, and I wasn't the only one. Because now, as a counselor for my family, because my entire family went through trauma, including my brother and my sister and my other sister, we have lost time to the point where I will tell my brother, for example, I'm going to come pick you up, and we're going to go to the movies, and we're going to go to dinner. And I said, what time are you going to be ready? And he said 5 o'clock. I live in Stewart. He's in Fort Lauderdale. So by the time I get there, you would think he would be ready. But see, trauma makes you lose time. And I'm like, Leon, it's already 6 o'clock and you're not ready. He says, what? I thought it was 5 o'clock. You see what I mean? But I've done my healing work. He's just starting his. And for people like us who's been through trauma, you lose that type of time. You lose that circadian rhythm in your brain because it stops. But what doesn't stop is that adrenaline drip. You're always dripping adrenaline. So you're running when there's no threat. You're fighting when there's no fight. And that's what I had to get hold of in my life in order to get myself well.
As you were telling the story, I'm the pictorial that you're communicating and displaying. I was walking with you and not breathing as you were telling your story, because it was like I was in there living it, because I actually saw it. And when you go through trauma, regardless of what trauma it is, it does captivate you and hold you, and it takes you back to a place where you were bound and not free. But the question that I asked was, what were the consequences of Edward?
So Edward, I knew his consequences. I just knew that when I was in that police car that day, and I remember driving away from where he picked me up, and I remember screaming and crying. It was like I didn't say a word all that time. I didn't have a voice, but here I'm with this police. So a part of me felt safe to rage, if you will, because I had a lot of rage in me that I didn't even know I had.
11 years old, so 11.
I had no clue that I had that type of rage, and I had that rage well into my adult years. But back to that time, I remember wanting my sister's picture. So in my, I remember looking at her picture, her telling me to slide the chains, me listening to the water, but it's so. It was so slow motion that I don't know what I did with her picture. And I remember when I got in the police car, I looked at the picture. I realized I left it. And when I realized I left it, I lost it. I lost it because I had that attachment with my sister. And to this day, and
she was your angel.
She was our everything, really. She was our everything. And I the book is dedicated to her. And most people who read the book understand why. But that day, I remember how it felt. to not have her picture. I felt like my life was over because I didn't have her picture, because it was my point of contact with who I was before the wolves, before my stepfather, before trafficking, before everything else that was about to happen in my life. And because from that point, the trauma didn't end. And that's the thing. If we don't get a second rescue from trauma, we re-victimize. Okay? We will re-victimize, and we will re-victimize without even knowing, because the adrenaline is dripping. The adrenaline is dripping. And it dripped me all the way to pregnant at 13. It dripped me to being suicidal at 15. I was in the back of an ambulance, first and only time ever in an ambulance in my life, at 15 years old, trying to take my life. I was just done. I was just done with being mistreated and being abused. And at this time, it was intimate partner violence. And I was just done. And so I tried to commit suicide. And that didn't work. And that led me to more re-victimization. I became a crack addict at 16 years old. I was arrested on national TV at 18 years old. And then fast forward from there, I was still adrenaline dripping to self-destruction. And that's what we do. And I was just on this road to self-destruct. And then finally, the last thorn in that book talks about being diagnosed with AIDS, not knowing that I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker, didn't know what was wrong with me. But what we don't know will hurt us. And so the Lord says, my people perish for lack of knowledge, Hosea 4:6. So we need to get knowledge. But the only way, my life and my personal story, that I was able to get knowledge was to be teachable and to be humble. And that takes work when you've been traumatized.
Sandra, I have spent probably 30 years dealing with people from all kinds of walks of life, intimate partner violence, all kinds of trauma. Everyone doesn't have the voice to articulate. Literally, as you talk, you take people inside of your journey. There are people that are listening right now who have heard words like trauma and trafficking, but tonight they are hearing it. They're hearing the dynamics that happen as a result of it. They're hearing literally the dichotomy that is going on between your mind and what's happening there. And you going through this from 7 to 11, you had some of the worst things of your life, and it just continued to spin out of control. I want to ask you a question because of the fact so often we hear about what have happened to people, but we don't take a deep enough dive into what led them there. You talked about the fact of, even inside a divorce sometime, when there's a divorce that happened and one or the other parent brings someone else in their life, in more cases than none, is when the mother brings someone else in their life and there's a man that is there and these type things happen, it changes dynamic. Every one of your fears was so legitimate. Here's this love. You're trying to really cover your mom. You don't want to break her heart. You don't want to do any of those things there. But yet this is happening to you. Classic victimization where we do try to protect. Although in this case, you're protecting your mom, but by the same token, the perpetrator is also kind of off the hook for that period of time. The thing I want to say, because so many people are listening, that oftentimes when these shifts happen, and we, especially with little girls, when little girls are involved, that's why I tell mothers, when you have daughters, you have to especially be very, very mindful when there's a man that is introduced into their lives.
Yes.
Because, the vulnerability that is there, the individuals, sometimes their sickness and willing to do whatever might happen. Your journey takes you trying to run from one monster and run into the other monsters. And once again, here it is, violation, abuse, and these things that are happening. And then to see that there was no mercy. And I want people to understand this because this is years ago, and yet it's still trafficking. It's become a major story in the last 10 years here, everything. But actually, you dealt with this many years ago, as did many other people. But like you said, there wasn't an official name and those things there. Where I'm leading up to is this. You go through all of these things. You one thing after another. You end up. You're pregnant at 13.
13 years old. Yes.
Listen. It had to be the grace of God, because I say that you had 13 and you're pregnant, haven't gone through all that. I mean, it took you 2 years later before you attempted suicide. I mean, that's a lot for anyone to endure in that mindset. When you were pregnant, did you go through this mindset of whether or not I'm going to keep the baby? Am I going to abort the baby? Am I going to run? What are the thoughts that went through your head at that time?
When I first found out I was pregnant, the first thing I felt was guilt, because I said, how can I allow this to happen? Remember, when we're young, we internalize everything. Everything's our fault. The divorce is our fault. The rape is our fault, especially as women in general. We have this nurturing disposition that's inbuilt in us, ingrained in us from our Creator, to nurture and to provide love.
Right.
At that same token, we nurture our own internal stigmas. Right. And so at 12, when I got pregnant, I got pregnant at 12 years old.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. I got pregnant coming up into 13. I had my baby by the time I was 14. But I remember feeling so guilty because I got pregnant. I felt guilty because I got pregnant. Because I said,
were
what
you
can
in foster care when this happened, or were you out?
I ran away from foster care. I was put in foster care so much that I stopped packing, because when you go from foster care to foster care to foster home, you just stop packing. It becomes a game to you, and you just get ready to run again. And I remember being in Littman Shelter in Fort Lauderdale, and I remember thinking, I've already mapped 4 exits out of this place because it's a joke. And I remember being so angry, because though you want to talk to me, you want to feed me, you want to clothe me, and all those things are necessary, you're not you're not touching me where I was touched. And I want to make that make sense, because it sounds a little off, but I'm going to make sense for you. You got to touch everything that was touched when it comes to a victim. It's almost like this. If you ever gotten bitten by a snake, God forbid you ever did. But if for anyone who's gotten bitten by a snake, you need that same anti-venom to stop the impact of that poison. And if you don't have it, 9 times out of 10, you will not live, because poisonous snake bites are deadly. But I think it's very peculiar and very appropriate to mention this. You need the same anti-venom from that same snake to stop the impact of that poison. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
When you've been victimized by sex trafficking, when you've been victimized by a rape, whatever it is, you have to be touched in that area, in that place inside, in order to heal from that area. So feeding me is not touching that area. Giving me a safe place to stay, it's not touching me in that area, especially when I don't feel safe in here anymore. Because you took me out of trafficking, but you didn't take trafficking out of me.
My
Jesus.
So what does that look like? What's that touching look like? Do I need to go through that again? No, that's not what I mean. Let me break it down. It means that I have to be held in a safe way. I need to be touched and held in a safe way, because my nervous system has been impacted by what has happened to me. So it's not just talking therapy here. It's not just talking counseling. That's why I'm a fitness instructor to this day. As a fitness instructor, I have rewired my entire nervous system from that trauma. And I had to, because going to school, I remember trying to fight to go back to school, because I love school. I was always a nerd in school. I always loved to read. You know, while my brothers and sisters was outside playing, I had a book in my hand. I can tell you of so many poets, from Edgar Allan Poe, okay, to Shakespeare. I was just a nerdy kid that loved books. And I just remember, after my stepfather raped me, I took all the things that I loved the most and I threw them in the garbage, because they didn't keep, and some part of my brain felt like my dreams that I had in these books, all the places these books had taken me in my imagination failed to keep this
Didn't
from
keep you
happening.
safe.
It kind of betrayed me. So I threw it away. You see? So this is what I mean by a skewed perception. Trauma skews our perception. And I had to learn not to trust my survival mode perception and learn the difference between this and reality. Because until we get healed and go through counseling, then this will always be that. And that is not reality. It's based on our very skewed perception, our survival mode perception. And I had to learn that. So, Pastor, you mentioned how I'm able to articulate the way I'm articulating. Let me tell you why. It's not Sandra. It has nothing to do with her. It is the Holy Spirit. Scripture says, I've been crucified with Christ, yet I live. Not I. Not I need to emphasize that, but Christ that lives within me. You see, when I tried to commit suicide, it was because I had went through so much trauma. And at this time in my life, I had moved back with my mom because I was living with my children's father for a bit, and he was very abusive.
How many children did you have?
Just one. My one daughter.
Okay.
And let me go back a little bit. You asked me about adoption and all of that. I was in DCF custody when I was pregnant. So I was taken to Miami to a girls' home called St. Vincent's Girls' Home. And when I was taken there, I remember rage. I had so much rage in me that I had heartburn. I had so much rage in me that I would break out. That's how angry I was. But I was so controlled with it because I received those spankings when I was younger. So them spankings kind of taught you how to be in self-control, even when you were angry. So I was angry because they brought me back to Miami. Because the last time I ever saw a sign that said Miami, first and only time, was when I was trafficked to Miami. And I remember when I was on 95 South, seeing Miami, and then entering into Miami, being trafficked, then I lost track of time. Now, as a pregnant teenager, I go back to Miami in a girls' home, and I remember telling the counselor there, the youth counselor, why didn't the social worker tell me she was taking me to Miami? And I remember asking it like very belligerently. I was so angry because I'm like, how can she bring me back to the same place that this happened to me? But nevertheless, the residential counselor at St. Vincent's wanted to speak to us individually. When I say us, I mean all the girls there, because St. Vincent's is only teenage girls. And once you have your baby, you're placed back into foster care or a placement where you and your baby will be, or you and your baby will be separated. Because now I'm a ward of the state.
Right.
So I lose all control over my life, which makes me more angrier. And I remember the residential counselor calling me in her office, telling me she wanted to talk to me about my options for adoption. And I remember learning Spanish at this time because Miami is a Spanish-speaking town. And that's where I learned to speak Spanish, by the way. And I speak some Spanish. And I remember wanting to curse her out. And I don't curse. My mama told me never to curse. And my sister taught me. But I remember wanting to curse her out in English and in Spanish because she was asking me to give up the one thing that I felt was only mine, which would be my daughter. And I knew it was a girl. Back in those days, we didn't do sonograms to know the sex.
Right.
A voice, and I know now it was the Holy Spirit, whispered it to me, said that I would have a daughter. And I already had her name. Her name was Caseta. Caseta means my house, my home. Because I felt like I never had a home because I was moved around so many places. So I said, she will be my home and I will be hers. So I named her Sandra Maria. My middle name is Maria and her name is my house, Maria, my little house. Fast forward to when I tried to commit suicide. I was done with my daughter's dad abuse. And then on top of that, I found out that he was seeing someone else. And at this time, I moved back with my mother. And I remember him coming over to my mother's home and wanting to be with me. And I told him I was done with being mistreated and I didn't want to be with him anymore. At that very moment, I was holding my daughter and he punched my daughter out of my arms. And I remember saying, "That's my daughter. Give her back to me." And I remember him punching me again. And I remember going quiet because I didn't want my daughter in the middle of it. So I remember saying, if it would save my daughter the trauma of seeing this violence the way I saw it between my mother and my dad, I'm going to just stop fighting. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to say another word because all I remember is seeing my daughter's eyes in the middle of it. And this is why I became a counselor, by the way, because children, every single day, I counsel people all over now. And I love being a counselor, but I can't tell you how my heart breaks when I hear kids are in the middle of their parents screaming and yelling and fussing and fighting and cursing each other out. And they're doing it as if the children are not right there in the room, hearing the cursing and the profanity, seeing you fight each other. And no wonder they get ripped apart because they're the composite of their mother and their father. And their little brain is thinking, if my mother and my dad is being ripped apart, then what is left of me? Because that's what I felt. And so when my children's father left out of the room, out of the house with my daughter, I had a talk with God, and I told God I was done. I told God I was finished, and I wanted a one-way ticket, and I quote, off of this thieving planet. I said, God, you didn't stop Robert. You didn't stop the wolves. I call them the wolves, my traffickers. I say, you stopped nothing. I said, and now you didn't even stop my daughter from being taken. And I said, I'm done. I said, you didn't stop it, and I'm done. And I took over 200 pills that day. I went in my mother's cabinet, took all the pills, and my stepfather at this time was very sick. She was still married to my stepdad. I took every pill in her cabinet, every pill in every bathroom I could find, every pill from the Dexatrim I was taking to try to slim up. At that time, I was trying to slim up a little bit. I took over 200 pills. And then I found myself on the ground, and that was it. I don't remember anything else except for being in an ambulance and having the people ask me what day it was and what my name was and all these orienting questions. And I remember being angry with God because I woke up.
You know, Sandra, it's a powerful story now. And we just want to say to the audience that may be listening, if you have questions or comment, please put it there in the comment section. You know, I've known you for a number of years, and I've seen your resiliency. And I have a copy of your book. And I've heard you share. I don't know if it's just tonight. I feel every word that you've said.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And though I am a man, I feel the empathy. I feel the pain. And one of the things that is so devastating to me, you know, I thank God, you know, I'm a father of sons, but I love my daughters. And I feel for it. This must be the week I've had people to share with me about the pain that they have felt at the hands of wolves, as you said. And yet it's still through everything that you've gone through, your mother, and you call God out. And I'm sitting here going, I think I would call God out too.
Yes, I did.
I mean, you literally, and I want people to understand this because, you know, we always been told, you don't question God. Well, where's that written? You know, where's that written? Our finite minds, we have no other place to go but to question God at times when we don't understand.
That's right.
You call God on the carpet, as a lot of people do. And then we take into our own hands our own fate. Because that's really what, although, you know, we change the term these days about, you know, suicide, you know, death by suicide, and yet it's still Suicide is that. It's that permanent solution, for a temporary problem. But at the time that you're in it, it doesn't seem temporary.
Doesn't seem temporary.
It seems forever. And you went through these things. You've endured these things inside of this. And I tell you, I'm trying to hold it together, because when you begin to talk about your daughter became the only thing that connected you to something that you own, something that belonged to you, something that could not, in your mind, be taken. And
it was taken.
When it was taken, it was your breaking point. It was the point. It was your breaking point inside of that. You know, there are people that are listening right now, and it might not be a trafficking story, but they're going through hell, high water. They've gone through custody issues. They've gone through, so many things there. And yet it's still your resiliency. And I know, listen, we only have about 14 minutes left, or 13 minutes. And there's a lot.
We gotta have you back, Sandra. We're gonna have to do part 2 if you're available next week, because I found myself, I'm just like emotionally, I'm just like, I'm there with you still as a young girl watching, because I started the show saying that this is week up to Mother's Day, and there's so many mothers that are listening and will play the show. And those mothers, I want you to pass this show along, because we take so much for granted. We allow our children to raise themselves because we're so caught up in our own thing till we don't actually see what's going on and expose our little boys and girls to predators.
Yes.
They're affected emotionally and mentally, and you wonder what's wrong with them. How did they turn out this way? It's because they were left uncovered. So what would you say to those mothers that are listening? Because we look to the mothers, they're the nurturers, as you said. So we look to the mothers to cover and the fathers to protect. So what would you say in that instance?
In that instance, I would say this. This is an opportunity. The only way we can reverse these cycles of trauma, and they are cycles. My cycle was started way before I was ever born. My grandmother was abused by my grandfather. I never knew until what I knew. My mother was abused by my father. My sister Joyce was abused by her husband. So these things are generational. They are generational. And I need to tell you this because I think this is so important. I just talked about suicide, and many people under the sound of my voice probably have dealt with suicidal ideations. I want to let you know something. Like Pastor Thicklin just said, we try to make a permanent solution to a very temporary problem, and it's temporary. There's two things that happens in suicide. One, anger. It's always an undercurrent of anger. Two is hopelessness. And anytime anger and hopelessness meets, you will have an upshot. That's why we have these mass shootings. That's why we have suicides. They're one and the same. It's that anger and that hopelessness that meet together. And that's why we need to hold fast to our profession of faith. You see, without faith, I wouldn't be here. Because I tell you, Dr. Valerie, that was just the beginning. It was just the beginning of what would be a lifelong struggle. When I started going through this, and I just gave up. And I remember when I got my daughter back, it was my stepfather, by the way, my stepdad that got my daughter back for me. The same man that raped me at 7. It's all in my book. It was him, because I remember when my mother, and I'll say this very quickly and then go to your question. I remember my mother, when I was getting better from that suicide. And by the way, I was sick for a long time because it messed up my senses, my sense of smell, my sense of taste. So I couldn't smell anything strong for a long time. I couldn't go down the season aisle at Publix or any store. I had to avoid certain aisles altogether with scents. But I remember my taking care of my stepfather because he was sick at this time. He had cancer. And I remember her going to work and me being there without my daughter. So I was dead. I told myself that I'm already dead and it's better for me to be dead, even though the suicide didn't work, because dead things don't feel nothing. And I said, if I don't feel nothing, then I'm good. And I said, that's what I'll do. So I'm angry with God. I'm not feeling anything. But I told my mom, Mommy, can I do anything for you while you're at work? She said, just keep an eye on Robert for me and listen out for him. So my mother always worked 2 and 3 jobs. She went to work. I went to Robert's room, and this went on for over a year. Robert, can I get you anything? Can I help you with anything? I would take his urinal from the bed. I would empty his urinal, rinse it out, and put it back on his bedside. Because at that time, they bought a hospital bed to the room because he was terminal at that time. He needed ice or water, I would bring him ice or water. Whatever he needed, I would bring it to him. And I would say, I'll be here if you need me. Just call me. So you see, there is some benefit to dying. There's a benefit. And I don't want to sound morbid when I say that. But when we die to pain, when we die to the ego, and that's what God was doing. I didn't know it at the time, but he had me right where he wanted me. He wanted me to die to all the pain and all the trauma, but I still had a ways to go. And so what I would tell the women that are listening and the mothers, we get one opportunity to raise our child. Oftentimes our children are grown and we're still dealing with the mother-daughter wound or father-son wound. When we have an opportunity right now, we have an opportunity if we're just teachable. Just be teachable. I had to be teachable. And that may sound a little condescending to some people, but you got to get rid of that ego. I'm almost Dr. Anderson, but I promise you, I learned from my children, I learned from my mentees, I learned from everybody around me, because the more I learn, the more I realize what I don't know. I don't know. And that's the benefit. The less we know, the more we think we know. The more we know, the more we know what we don't know. That's how that works. So mothers and fathers, be teachable. Your child have one childhood. And if you understand what the fussing and the fighting and the cursing and this horrible music that we're playing around our children in our car with the profanity and the over-sexualized lyrics, if you understand what you're doing to your child's brain, you would turn it off and you would make a change. So I beseech you, I beg you, for the sake of your children and your children's children's children, to curtail that now and to start to become to get in a place where you're teachable and you're understanding these dynamics of family. You can heal your family. As you can see, my family have been restored because I was teachable, because I learned my lessons from the thorns. And the number one lesson, Dr. Valerie and Dr. Thicklin, is His grace is sufficient. His grace is enough for all your pain, all your trauma, what your dad did, what your mom didn't do, that rape that you went through that nobody knows about, that hurt, all things that you don't have language to express, so you would just get angry about it. Because what we can't understand, we get angry about, right?
Right.
His grace is sufficient. And if you just hold on and continue to learn, you'll see that the best is yet to come. Yes.
We are ran out of, I have to remember to breathe because I'm listening to you and not breathing. We have to have you back, but talk about your book. This is the cover of your book you have here. So if you can talk about that, and also let me know if you can come back next, please.
Yes, we'll be back because sessions like this need more time, because oftentimes when we're talking about this, you open up wounds in others. And I don't want to leave anybody out there open, because
right, exactly.
I've been told that I share at such an authentic level, and I do, because secrets only transmit trauma, right? When we act like nothing ever happened and we're so strong, that strong Black woman myth that we have. And it's not just Black women. A lot of women do that. A lot of women of color, and all women, we got to be strong, because if we're not strong, how are we going to make it? So, but you don't have to be strong all the time. My book is available at my website, and Dr. Valerie will put up that website, but it chronicles my life. It chronicles my life from the very beginning to the time that I was arrested on national TV for drug for in a drug sting. It chronicles addiction and what is the underlying cause of addiction. And I know because the Lord taught me in my crack addiction, I thought I was going to die. I didn't think I was going to see 20 years old, and I'm 53 today. But God showed me the reason why. He showed me why a lot of rehab centers don't work, because we're dealing with it biologically and not spiritually. We're not just our biology, right? So a lot of these social service programs deal with our getting you safe, or getting you food and taking care of those basic needs. But what you're leaving out of that component is that we're triune being. We're triune. We're body, mind, and spirit. And you cannot take care of my body and my mind without nurturing my soul. And that may not sound politically correct, but that's why addiction has a high rate of recidivism. That's why incarceration have a high rate of recidivism. Depression, anxiety, I can go on and on, but not to belabor the point. We need to understand that we are made in the very image of God. No matter what your belief system is, that's the fact. You may not think your car needs unleaded gasoline, but put orange juice in your car, because that's your belief system. Your car will malfunction. It will not work because the designer of your car said it needs unleaded gasoline. The designer of us, every human being, is made in the image of God, and we cannot leave out the spiritual component when it comes to healing trauma and healing grief.
Yes, Sandra, we're out of time, but to purchase her book and learn more about her and a nonprofit, go to SandraMariaAnderson.com. That's SandraMariaAnderson.com, and you will find her book, Lessons from the Thorns. There's so much more that we want you to talk about and discuss, but I want everyone to go to her website and purchase that book. And that way, when she comes back, you'll be able to put messages or send a message or questions that you may have. So purchase the book. And it's Mother's Day is coming up. This is a perfect gift to give someone and help them be free, because you may not be sex trafficked or molested or raped, but we have so many emotional scars from childhood.
Yes.
Things that went on with us from our youth that we've taken into maturity. And some of you that are listening that are parents and have younger children, you don't know the signs and what to look for and what's going on with your child. I have 4 children, and I tell you, because I was traumatized as a child sexually as well, I took my kids everywhere. And I hated to leave them with their father, especially since he was an abuser. So, but I tried to take them everywhere I went, because I didn't want them to hurt. I didn't want them to feel pain, because I wanted to protect them. And her book, Lessons from the Thorns, I want you to go and order it. His grace is sufficient.
And we will be back next week. Dr. Valerie, thank you for having me back. And we'll wrap up some family exercises that we can do practically to heal the family, that you can do immediately to start to heal the family. It can and it will happen.
Right. I didn't want, yes, that's why I definitely wanted you to come back, because when you're dealing with topics like this, it opens up. And we want to be able to put some healing in the midst of it. So we definitely want to do a part 2, Sandra. Thank you so much for being so transparent and open. Dr. Thicklin?
Well, Dr. Val, I just want to say this as well. Sandra, we want to make them aware of some of the support groups that you have that really is about, so much dealing with emotional intelligence, healing parts that needs to happen. We want to talk about that. And for those that are listening, please share. Take this video tonight, share it with others, get them back on with us, because this is important. We've stopped at a part of your journey, and you mentioned the fact of having been contracted AIDS and things, and that's a whole nother journey.
Another
through
series.
that.
Almost 40 years now, and that's a whole nother story, and we'll deal with that too when we come back, because these are real life experiences that we're dealing with every single day.
Every
And
day.
sometimes we think that there's no way out, but I promise you, it
You
is.
sound like me.
It is. We have a film, we have a documentary that is out now, that is nationwide, that's going to be released, called Taking Innocence, where I'm counseling and I'm mentoring people. God is saving you to save others.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
it's going to happen. The best is yet to come.
Absolutely.
Well, I've got to get my tissues. I mean, I've been sniffing the whole time, and I make no small point about it tonight. Such a great evil under the sun that we see. But for those who are suffering, they need to know that there is healing, there is transformation. And that's the beautiful part about your book. You talk about lessons from the thorns. All of us have thorns in our life, or have thorns, but we've got to get the lessons from it. There are lessons from it. And the major lesson that came from it is that you understood that His grace,
hallelujah,
is sufficient
that's
through
it.
it all.
That's
the
it.
embarrassment, the stigmatism, all of that cannot outlast His grace that's able to empower and strengthen. And as you have been the epitome of, and to transform. That sounds like transforming grace to me. But
the Bible says there's all these things are common. The Bible says there's nothing that you've traversed through that's not common to man. Yes. So we have to understand that we're not cursed. There's no curse going on here. That this is transgenerational trauma, and where there is grace, where there is God, there is healing. There's healing and there's hope.
Amen. I'm just so full. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I want everyone to tune in next week and tell someone about the show. Share it on your Facebook wall. Share it on your LinkedIn. I'm going to repost the show on YouTube. And I want everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll know when different shows come out. And please share it. And for our mothers, I love you and I thank you and appreciate you. And flowers for you. From Hot Topics from the Soul, I give you flowers and thank you for being the queens that you are, resilient and beautiful and smart and important and intelligent. Blessings to you. And until next week, join us for another Hot Topics from the Soul. Good night and God bless.
Thank you.